Again, thank you to those that joined this evening. We are proud to be united with our partnering organizations in this site. Our shared objective in dealing with climate be part of this movement. So we'll continue these discussions in our respective climate caucuses and within our local unions. It's important that each union discussion and conversation we had tonight continues as we build our path to real change that uplifts current union workers and creates more union jobs. The Alameda Labor Council's Climate Caucus meets monthly with our next meeting on Monday, August 2nd at 5:30 p.m. So keep an eye out for an email with more information on our climate caucuses and partnering organizations. I want to thank you all again, and I will now pass this over to Amy Scott to give a brief statement. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to get to Amy in a minute, but we got a few more presentations we're going to do.
Okay.
And then we'll totally get to Amy to finish talking about the climate caucuses. God, my mind kind of went blank there. Thank you, Zolly, for that play. And we'll have you back on to plug this again in just a bit. So our next presentation, next presenter, really, we're going to have one person, no more Brady Bunch screens for you all, we're going solo. Our next presenter is Dr. Robert Pollan, who's a professor of economics and the co-director of the Political Economy and Research Institute, Perry, at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where I actually, humble brag, went to grad school. So this is great. I'm really excited to have someone from UMass Amherst here. He'll be talking about really regarding a major report that he helped commission, that he was a lead author on, concerning California's path to a sustainable future. So with that, Dr. Pollan, if you're there, you can come on screen, and the floor is yours for your presentation.
It says I cannot get.
I got you. Don't worry, I got you here. We'll get you on there. Hold on. It's always fun. Where are you? Thank you, everyone, for dealing with me as I get this through. Where are you? Why can't I find you? Can someone please? Is anyone else there that can help me with this? To find his?
I don't see his name.
I don't see his name.
Different name, Colin?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I can't seem to find you. Hold on.
Robert Pollan.
Yeah. Okay. Hang with us, everybody. We're going to figure this out. It's going to be a lot of fun. I don't know how you're talking, and I can't see you.
He's showing up under Josh, under your name.
Oh, weird. Creepy. Okay, here we go. You are not Josh Anajar, and you don't have to play me on TV, but let me do this, and I'm going to ask you to start your video.
Okay.
All right, there we go. So this is no other name. He's not Josh Anajar. I'm sorry to give you that name, and we'll fix that in a second, but the floor is yours.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for having me to this really important gathering, discussion. I'm really happy to be part of it. As Josh, the real Josh, just mentioned, so my co-workers and I here at UMass Perry put out a study a month ago that is tries to cover a lot of everything with respect to an economic recovery and a green transition for the state of California. And I'm going to go through some of it. I'm going to focus on the part on labor and a just transition for workers. It is, if I may say, data-driven. I heard Sadie Wilson talk about the work she's doing as being data-driven. Maybe this study is way over the top, data-driven. I am going to be presenting numbers. You don't have to follow all the numbers. The point is, I just want you to understand that the main arguments that we're making are actually grounded in some pretty extensive research. So with that, I am going to share the screen. I gotta go to this. Okay, so this is the study, as I mentioned. So a program for economic recovery and clean energy transition in California by myself, and you can see my co-authors all here at UMass. This gives you the overall set of chapters in the study. So you can see we start right where California is in terms of trying to recover from the pandemic and the centrality of a clean energy transition project as undergirding the short-term recovery. We then talk about clean energy investments and job creation, which is what I'm going to focus on. I'm also going to focus on parallel investments in manufacturing, infrastructure, land restoration, and agriculture that are associated with the so-called Thrive agenda that was really developed by the Green New Deal Network nationally, was introduced as a bill in Congress by Senator Markey and Representative Dingell. So we'll talk about that, again, from the perspective of job creation primarily. So we will then be able to see the prospects for job creation through investing in a green transition in California. Then we will focus on the impact on transitioning out of fossil fuels in California and pursuing just transition policies for fossil fuel workers. And we will get specific, quantitative about it. I think a lot of people have made huge contributions of all sorts. Maybe our own small contribution is to help quantify these things and see how they can actually get done in some specifics. We also focus on 3 counties, including Contra Costa County, where the impacts will be disproportionately large. So those are the things I'm going to focus on. I'm not going to talk so much about the getting to zero emissions by 2045 or financing, but we do have a financing framework, and people want to discuss that. Happy to discuss it through the Q&A. Okay, now get this thing. Okay, well, to start off, as you know, California is a leader in the U.S. and globally, actually, in terms of its climate policies. So focusing on 3 main policy goals, a 40% CO2 emission reduction by 2030, emissions-free vehicles by 2035, and carbon neutrality, in other words, net zero or better by 2045. So those are the goals around which we built our study. And the question is, what does it take to get there in terms of investing in building a green energy economy and associated investments in agriculture, land restoration, infrastructure. And once we know what it's going to take to get there, then how many jobs do we get? That's the simple framework. There's a lot of details, but that's basically it. Okay. It's not, okay. Okay, as I said, I'm going to show tables that are coming right out of the study, but obviously I don't expect you to memorize the tables, but it's good to get the general idea. So what we do, first of all, is we ask the question, really, what would it take in terms of transitioning into a clean energy infrastructure for the state of California? And we model this based on cost estimates and so forth. And without going into the details, basically, we focus on 2 areas of investment: investing in energy efficiency and investing in renewable energy, clean renewable energy, and investing in energy efficiency at about $9.3 billion per year. And you can see the areas of investment. And then investing in renewables, solar, onshore wind, low emissions, bioenergy, geothermal, and so forth, okay? And at $66 billion per year. Again, if you want me to tell you how I got that number, I can, but I won't focus on that now. The point is here, we invest in these activities and you get about 300,000 jobs directly and indirectly. Direct meaning the actual activities, such as installing solar panels or putting up wind turbines or investing in a public infrastructure. Those are the direct jobs. Indirect jobs are the supply chain around those direct activities. And what we're looking at here is the supply chain as it is focused in the state of California per se. So we have about 300,000 jobs. Then we add induced jobs. Induced jobs means the number of jobs that get created when the workers have the clean energy jobs. They have more money in their pockets. These are enhancing their living standard, and they spend more money, and that in turn creates ripple effects, more jobs throughout the economy. So we estimate that we're going to get about 418,000 jobs in total, including induced jobs. That amounts to a little over 2% of the California workforce. Okay, now the next question, and this is obviously critical, certainly for any kind of labor mobilization, is we do a lot of work around job quality. That is, you can see the categories we look at: compensation, health insurance, retirement plans, and union membership. Now, the range in terms of job quality is pretty large. So that, for example, if we're looking at jobs in industrial efficiency, the average compensation, including everything, is about $92,000. But in mass transit, it's about $38,000. If we look at solar, it's about $97,000. Whereas in hydro, small-scale hydro, it's about $80,000. And we have a range in terms of unionization as well. Now, this is what this is. I'm going to come back to this because we're going to compare it with the fossil fuel jobs. There's a lot of range. On average, the quality is better than the overall labor force, but it is not as good as the fossil fuel labor force, a critical point. But I'm glad to be talking to union organizers. This is an opportunity to organize in these sectors and to raise job quality standards. I know, for example, you just heard from Carol Zabin, and she and her co-authors did an incredibly important report describing ways through which we can raise job quality in California in the clean energy transition. We, in this study, have documented some of these issues in terms of the jobs that will be created, in terms of their existing job quality. It's a snapshot today, today's conditions. The point is to raise job quality. Okay, then looking at the manufacturing, infrastructure, land restoration, and agricultural jobs, just to really quickly summarize those, from the so-called Thrive Agenda program, we're estimating that you're going to get overall about 626,000 jobs total. So overall, when we combine the investment programs in renewable energy, energy efficiency, infrastructure, land restoration, the overall level of investment is about $138 billion per year. It's about 3.5 or 4% of California's overall level of economic activity, or GDP. And guess what? You get about 1 million jobs. So this is a program to create 1 million more jobs in California. And those jobs will continue over time as long as the investments are made in these areas. And that means you're going to get an increase in employment relative to the existing labor force of about 5.5%. So were we to enact this program in total, and everything else about the economy stayed the same as an assumption, you could go from something like a 7.5% unemployment rate to a 2% unemployment rate. Effectively, this becomes a full employment agenda that also tackles our climate emergency, and it also addresses issues of advancing manufacturing and public infrastructure. Okay, I said that I'm going to talk about the transition for the fossil fuel industry. And I know very, very well this is a serious matter. It is a matter that unions have been focused on for a long time. We have to confront it openly. Okay, according to our estimates, there's about 112,000 people employed at present, or at least according to the most recent data, employed in these various sectors of the fossil fuel industry in California. And you can see the sectors: natural gas distribution, oil and gas extraction, petroleum refining, support activities for oil and gas, and so forth. So if we are talking about these jobs, which represent, it's not a lot percentage-wise, but these are real people's jobs. It's about 0.6% of all the jobs. And if we're saying we're going to get, talking about to 2030, we're going to get to something like a 40 to 50% reduction in emissions, that also means you're going to have to mean 40 to 50% contraction in employment. That's what it means. So we have to deal with that and talk about how we implement a really robust and just transition. Okay, now we saw the characteristics of workers in the fossil fuel-based sectors, and here they are, and we saw them in the renewable energy and energy efficiency. The jobs are better on average, not every single one, of course, but on average, compensation, including everything, is higher. Health insurance, wider representation, better retirement benefits, and higher union membership. These are facts. But again, this is a snapshot today. The fossil fuel-based jobs did not start out as good jobs. People didn't think about working in a refinery or working, for that matter, in a coal mine as a good job. They became good jobs because people organized to make them good jobs, because people like you, labor organizers, committed people, made them good jobs. And that's exactly the challenge that we face in the clean energy transition. In addition to which, we have to make sure that the transition is viable for these 120,000 people, their communities, and their families. Okay, so what do we think in terms of a policy package for workers that will be displaced as California phases out its fossil fuel-based industries? We have these 5 basic areas that constitute this, what we call the Just Transition Program. So pension guarantees for workers, employment guarantees. Somebody spoke to that before. In other words, if you're displaced, if your fossil fuel job is displaced, you're guaranteed another job. It could be another job in the clean energy area or the infrastructure area. It doesn't have to be. But there are, obviously, if we're generating 1 million jobs in those sectors, there will be huge opportunities. The jobs right now in the clean energy and agriculture and infrastructure pay less on average, so that we guarantee not just a job guarantee, but wage insurance. You get your same wage at least in transitioning to your new job. If you need retraining, 2 years of retraining guaranteed. If you need relocation support, not assuming that people will need relocation support. In fact, it's preferable that they not. I'll come back to that in a minute. But if they need it, it's there. We estimated at $75,000 per worker. Okay, now how many workers are going to require this level of support? That's a really critical question, because you see the big number, 112,000 workers, but they're not all going to get laid off right away. Even if you get to a zero emissions, zero fossil fuel economy by 2045, you are not going to lay off everybody now. They are going to be phased out over a long period between now and 2045. So what we do in this exercise is we look at the 10-year period from getting to 2030. So we assume that we are going to reduce emissions by about half, which means we're going to reduce fossil fuel activity by about half, okay? So that turns out to be about 5,700 people per year. So it's not 112,000 getting laid off every year. It's 5,755 people, jobs that are getting contracted. But then we also looked at the demographics of the labor force. And we assumed that people turning 65 about any time over this 10-year period about 80% of them are going to voluntarily retire. So that we are actually getting, there's about 5,800 jobs that are contracting, but of that 5,800, about 2,500 are going to be workers voluntarily retiring. So that you can see from this figure, the job loss is about 5,800, voluntary retirements, about 2,500, and then there are going to be 3,200 people whose jobs are going to be displaced. And those 3,200 people are the ones we focus on every year. The Just Transition Program has to be focused on getting these people back into good situations, at least as good as the ones that they have when their jobs get phased out. So again, a big table with a lot of numbers. You don't need to go through it, obviously, but I just want to show you that we're very careful in estimating for these 3,200 workers the costs of their income support, retraining support, relocation support, and we total it all up, and what it averages out to is about $470 million per year. Okay, that's for all the workers. That's for all 3,200 workers per year, and they're all going to get the benefits that we talked about, that I talked about just before, and that's going to be real money, as it should be. It's a little less than $500 million a year, real money. Now, but keep in mind that that $500 million a year is real money, but it also is less than 0.02% of California's GDP. So in compared to the overall economy in California, treating these 3,200 workers as they deserve with a just transition, the monetary costs are peanuts. We have to focus on that. I've done studies in other states around this. We get similar results. I'll mention in Colorado, we did a study 2 years ago, at least in part on the basis of our study. The state did introduce a program, an Office of Just Transition, focused on getting workers who are facing displacement into good situations. It can be done easily. It's critical, I think, it's critical that we emphasize that, yes, it's $500 million, but $500 million is a drop in the bucket, especially when we're dealing with the well-being of people and communities. Okay, I'll just also mention the $500 million estimate or thereabouts depends on policy introducing this phase down of fossil fuels in a steady way. If you don't do it in a steady way, if it becomes like plants just closing down without planning, just announcing we're laying off 700 workers, and I know such things are happening now, and it becomes these episodic layoffs, then it's going to cost more because you can't get the benefit of phasing out the workers who are going to face retirement in a steady way. So that jacks up the cost. It does. As you can see, we go from 469 million to 833 million. It's an additional 363 million based on not investing in policies to introduce a steady phase out. That said, even the 832 million per year is less than 0.04% of state GDP. So it's a bad policy to rely on these episodes of massive layoffs as opposed to a steady planned contraction. But even if you are faced with episodes, the state can easily afford giving workers the benefits that they need in transition. Okay, finally, as I mentioned, we do focus on 3 counties in California, including Contra Costa, because those 3 counties have the highest proportion of fossil fuel employment. So you can see from these graphs, the largest number of employees in the fossil fuel industry are in LA County with 26%. But because LA County is so big, it's a very small proportion of overall statewide, of over county-wide employment. But in Kern and Contra Costa, the share of the county employment is relatively large, 3.2% in Kern, 2.2% in Contra Costa. And so one of the things we advocate for as part of the just transition is for these counties to also get a disproportionate share of the investments in clean energy, in infrastructure, in restorative agriculture, and therefore enhancing the opportunities within those counties as the state moves into this transition to a green economy. So those are the basic features of the model. And again, the whole point of this is not to like toss zillions of numbers your way, but to get you to give you some support in the important work you're doing in organizing to do the things that you're talking about. Climate, labor, convergence, showing how advancing a Green New Deal, a green transition is fully compatible with raising living standards for workers and communities and supporting the workers in the fossil fuel industry that are going to inevitably face transition. Thanks, I'll stop there.
We're on a roll where people are stopping themselves. I guess this is awesome. So, okay, I know we have a lot of questions for you, so why don't we get started? The first one will go to Ernie, and then Tim after you. So, Tim, hold on, but Ernie, go ahead, brother. Got you unmuted.
Well, actually, Josh, my question had been for the previous panel where I was asking our Enviro and EJ partners if they would line up behind us on this plan by labor for labor to do a just transition. So it was actually for the previous panel.
Oh, shucks. I'm sorry about that, Ernie. I figured you were for this. So I'm going to keep moving then. Tim. And you got some answers there, Ernie. Tim.
Hi, Paul, and thanks, Josh. Mr. Paul, my curious, we said 40% of the jobs that would be lost or phased out, and then you given those counties. I mean, to me, those are black and brown communities. I don't think those jobs are. I mean, it seemed like they were just an afterthought. Like, I mean, like it's okay that that's a loss. That's not a loss. I mean, that's not okay that that's a loss. What do we? I mean, it's. I guess that it's. I see that the last chart you showed there that had the counties broken down, and in my particular county was Contra Costa County. There, I understand that, but it just seems like those 40% was. It's just like it's a accepted casualty. I guess is what I'm looking at. Well, my question is it?
No. Well, I mean the thing that we're trying to focus on, and I'm sorry if I wasn't clear enough, was focusing on just transition for all the workers in the state. It doesn't matter what county they're in. The reason I focused on Kern and Contra Costa is because the impact is going to be relatively large within the county, and that therefore investments in the clean energy transition should also be proportionally larger. That said, you know, all 3,200 workers per year, wherever they are in the state, it doesn't matter, wherever they are should have the exact same just transition benefits that they would have whether they're in Contra Costa or Kern County. So the just transition applies across the state, and by no means was I suggesting that that's an acceptable loss. There is a transition. It's going to happen. It has to happen. But that the just transition component of the program has to be central. And that's what I see as what I would call the Green New Deal would include the just transition right up there with everything else as a central feature of the program.
If I could ask another question, is that possible?
Follow up, sure. Go ahead, Tim.
Well, it's about the 2-year portion of the training portion. The Boilermakers go through a 4-year, 6,000-year apprenticeship program. After the 2 years, then how does what would the workers transition into then? Is that an acceptable training program? Is that how you see that?
So what I was working off was averages. I looked at training programs in California and elsewhere, and not just for Boilermakers, but obviously this is I'm dealing in an overall framework, and it, each feature of the overall framework doesn't necessarily apply exactly specifically to every worker under every set of circumstances. And if I were drafting legislation that would be implemented, such as in the case of Colorado, where they now have an Office of Just Transition and they can deal case by case with every given situation. I mean, that I couldn't do in a study that's so broad.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we're going to keep on moving here. So I got another question. Things people move their hands down. So hold on 1 second here and I will get them all. Why don't we go to this Norman Rogers? There you go, Norman.
Yeah, question about how the pension guarantees work. You might guess towards the end of my career, so that holds particular interest.
I imagine so.
Yeah. So, in my view, and the work research I've done on this, is that the pension guarantees can be implemented on the basis of financial regulation. In other words, for example, if you look at the study, we look at the conditions of pensions for as many of the companies that we could get data on, the pension for all the public corporations that report pensions. So, in fact, the pensions are in pretty good shape now. So the regulation would have to say, look, the condition of the pension fund has to be maintained over time. In other words, the companies are not allowed to, for example, distribute dividends. They're not allowed to engage in stock buybacks. They have to maintain the viability of the workers' pension. And that's going to be based on regulation. Now, let's say that the companies somehow don't do this, that they violate the law and therefore, let's just say that.
Okay. I like your laughter, but
okay. We do have a model.
Gotcha.
Yeah?
Yeah, I muted him. You're good. I muted you. Hold on. You're muted. Hold on. How did you get muted? I don't understand how you got muted. I didn't mute you. Someone else. All right. Well, there you go.
We did have the Power Plus program that was introduced under Obama for the coal industry, where the pension funds are not in good shape. And, as a last resort, the government was committed to guaranteeing the pensions of the coal miners. Now, that bill didn't pass in Congress, ironically, because Mitch McConnell didn't want it to pass, even though he's from Kentucky, and it would benefit workers in his state more than almost every other state. So that's my fallback position. But the first position is we can't let the companies speculate and gamble on the workers' pension funds. They have to be maintained.
And I know we're running late, so I got one question in the chat, and I know there's people with their hands raised, and I apologize. Like, we're supposed to end around this time, but we still have another presentation. So I have one question how many of these 1 million jobs are will be based in Bay Area communities that you spoke of? I got that from EJ from Sheet Metal Workers 104. So you talked about the 1 million jobs there, right? Any thoughts on that to answer EJ's question?
So, I didn't do this exactly region by region. I did do it, as I said, for the 3 counties that are going to be disproportionately impacted. The general idea was that the investments would be spread pretty evenly across the state, other than in these areas that are heavily impacted. So that, whatever the share of the labor force that's in Northern California now, roughly speaking, would be commensurate. It just would be that you would have an expansion of employment throughout the state.
Perfect. Okay, I know there was more questions, but I know we got to keep moving. Dr. Pollan, thank you so much. And if anyone's interested in the report, I know they can search, I think they actually had it in the chat. People linked it. So if anyone's interested in reading the report, there it is. And I really appreciate you coming and joining us. And we'll be seeing you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Absolutely.